Millionaire left his pregnant wife after the diagnosis, but she recovered and took it all. Millions of dollars can buy luxury cars, sprawling mansions, and the illusion of a perfect life. But deep within those glittering facades often lie secrets so profound they threaten to shatter everything. This is the story of a marriage born in promise and drowned in betrayal, of a pregnant wife cast aside by the one person sworn to protect her. When a devastating medical diagnosis sealed her fate, her wealthy husband made the cruelest choice. Yet from the rubble of heartbreak, a phoenix rose. She not only survived, she thrived. Her journey is a testament to resilience, a reminder that real power starts with the soul. Henry Coleman was the sort of man who wore ambition like a custom-tailored suit. At 32, he had already accumulated more money than his entire extended family had seen in their lifetimes. Born and raised in the suburbs of Sacramento, California, Henry had an affinity for risk-taking from an early age. He traded baseball cards in middle school with a calculated vigilance, always seeking the rare gem that others overlooked. By the time he entered high school, he had moved on to day trading small stocks with money borrowed from his supportive parents, convincing them his budding passion would blossom into a lucrative future. What truly set him apart, however, was his charisma. Henry possessed a magnetic energy that made people gravitate toward him. At social gatherings, he dominated the room without effort, weaving stories of his business conquests into epic tales that left his audience spellbound. His confidence was alluring even to those who claimed to see through it. Perhaps it was this confidence that eventually led him to Fiona. They met at a charity gala in downtown Sacramento, an event raising funds for cancer research. Fiona Townsend, then simply Fiona Townsend, not yet Fiona Coleman, was a volunteer there. She'd been folding pamphlets and placing them neatly on every table before the guests arrived. Henry, wearing an impeccably tailored navy blue suit, noticed her right away. Though she was just a volunteer that night, something about her warm smile and the earnest way she spoke about the fundraiser made an impression on him. Fiona came from a far more modest background. She grew up in a small home on the outskirts of the city, worked part-time jobs through college, and spent most of her time contributing to various volunteer causes. She had a genuine soul, the type who'd stay up all night comforting a grieving friend, or sacrifice her own comfort if it meant bringing a little bit of joy to someone else. It was this heart, so full of compassion, that ensnared Henry's interest the moment he watched her carefully position ribbons and balloons, ensuring every table looked perfectly presentable. He introduced himself as a benefactor for the event. A conversation sparked first about the charity, then about life. Fiona felt an immediate sense of caution, recognizing Henry's well-practiced charm, but he seemed genuinely interested in her opinions on philanthropic endeavors. As the gala continued, he came back to talk to her at every opportunity. By the end of the night, he'd asked her to join him for coffee, promising he only wanted to continue their fascinating discussion. Fiona hesitated, but something in his eyes, a hint of sincerity, amid all that polished bravado, convinced her to say yes. Coffee became dinner, and dinner became another date. Soon, Fiona found herself stepping into Henry's world of lavish meals, exclusive clubs, and influential connections. She wasn't entirely comfortable there. Her middle-class upbringing felt starkly at odds with Henry's high-rolling lifestyle, but she appreciated how he seemed to treasure her. The philanthropic side of Henry's life also impressed her. He donated significant sums to various charities, including the Cancer Research Foundation, where they'd met. While it was true that Henry's generosity occasionally doubled as a business strategy, helping him network with the right people, Fiona observed moments of genuine empathy in him. Moments that gave her hope this outwardly ambitious mogul possessed a softer center. When Henry proposed 6 months later, it felt quick, Yet she couldn't deny the whirlwind romance they'd shared. He dropped to one knee at a local botanical garden, a place Fiona adored for its serenity. She accepted. In that instant, her life seemed like an improbable fairy tale. She was marrying a man who had the world at his fingertips, and he was willing to share that world with her. For her parents, who lived on the lower end of the socio-economic ladder, it was a dream come true to see their daughter secure such a brilliant, successful partner. Within a year, they were wed at a lavish ceremony in Napa Valley, attended by industry titans and politicians. Henry often rubbed shoulders with. People praised the union as a match of brains and beauty, and every camera seemed drawn to Henry's triumphant smile. More intimate snapshots, however, showed Fiona's quiet warmth and the unassuming joy that made her so unique. Though Henry soared in the professional sphere, closing deals and multiplying his fortune, Fiona remained grounded. She spent her time volunteering and, when she wasn't at a charity event, she accompanied Henry on business trips. She helped him connect with communities and philanthropic projects, balancing out what sometimes felt like an obsession with profit. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it worked, thanks largely to Fiona's unwavering patience and Henry's willingness, at least initially, to compromise. One crisp January morning, Fiona woke up feeling a wave of nausea that caught her off guard. Thinking it might be just a stomach bug, she tried to brush it off. However, as the days passed, she found herself increasingly fatigued, with an unusually heightened sense of smell. The faint aroma of coffee would suddenly overwhelm her, churning her stomach. Suspecting something more, she purchased a home pregnancy test from a discreet pharmacy across town. While she and Henry had talked about having children someday, Fiona wasn't certain if this was the right time. She felt a flutter of excitement, but also worry about Henry's reaction. He was in the middle of a groundbreaking venture, something about a tech platform that would revolutionize financial analysis and working 14-hour days to ensure its success. The moment Fiona saw the positive lines, her heart pounded with a mix of joy and fear. She recalled how Henry sometimes spoke about fatherhood in hypothetical terms, always couched in disclaimers like "once everything settles down" or "when I've reached my next financial goal." Regardless, Fiona felt a surge of warmth bloom inside her. She was going to be a mother, an unplanned but, to her, welcome surprise. That evening, she decided to create the perfect atmosphere to share the news. She prepared Henry's favorite meal, roasted salmon in lemon butter sauce, and lit candles in their elegant dining room. She even dressed in a simple but elegant gown she knew he admired. Her plan was to reveal the pregnancy test result after dessert. However, Henry arrived home late, exhausted and visibly irritated. He dropped his briefcase on the marble floor with a thud, heading straight for a glass of whiskey at the bar. Though he forced a smile when he saw her preparations, the tension in his posture was undeniable. "I'm sorry," he muttered, loosening his tie. Investor meeting ran over, and then traffic was a nightmare. Undeterred, Fiona asked him to join her at the dining table. She tried to keep the meal warm in the oven, but some dishes had grown cold. Henry tried to look appreciative, but his gaze kept drifting to his phone. Sensing his distraction, Fiona decided to expedite her plan. She handed him a small velvet pouch after they finished eating. "Open it," she whispered, heart pounding. Henry pulled out the home pregnancy test, eyes widening in realization. "Are you serious?" he asked, voice tight. She nodded, tears of joy gathering in her eyes. "Yes, Henry, we're going to have a baby." For a flicker of a moment, she saw wonder in his expression, but as quickly as it came, it vanished, replaced by apprehension, almost dread. "That's wow," he said, forcing a half-hearted smile. "That's big news. It's just not the best timing." The words stung Fiona, though she tried not to let it show. "I know it's sudden," she conceded, but we talked about this someday. Maybe this is just earlier than expected. Henry gulped his whiskey. I need some time to process this, Fiona. My plate is already overflowing with work. That night he was distant. Fiona lay awake in bed, one hand over her stomach, wondering if Henry would truly come around. By the next morning he was gone before she woke, leaving a terse note, had an early flight to New York. We'll talk when I get back. Fiona swallowed her disappointment and tried to keep the spark of joy alive. Henry was ambitious, yes, but she hoped he would embrace fatherhood once he grasped the gravity of bringing new life into the world. Little did she know how deeply his fears and drive would begin to erode the foundation of their marriage. Henry's flight to New York was filled with conflicting thoughts and mounting pressures. He was on the verge of sealing a deal with an investment firm that could catapult his company into a new stratosphere of wealth. Yet the news that Fiona was pregnant had thrown him into emotional chaos. Once in Manhattan, he plunged into meetings. The city's towering skyscrapers and frenetic pace mirrored his internal state. During brief moments between negotiations, his mind wandered to thoughts of fatherhood, images of cradling an infant, rearranging his schedule for pediatric appointments. The visions both excited and terrified him. Was he ready for this? Back in Sacramento, Fiona scheduled a doctor's appointment with Dr. Samantha Lee, the OB-GYN at Cedars-Sinai, whom she and Henry had donated to in previous philanthropic drives. Fiona arrived early, a bundle of nerves. After some tests and an ultrasound, Dr. Lee confirmed she was around 8 weeks along. The doctor's gentle reassurance drew tears of relief from Fiona's eyes. But the appointment came with a twist. Dr. Lee noted some irregularities in Fiona's liver enzymes, nothing critical yet, but worth monitoring. Pregnancy can put extra stress on the body, Dr. Lee explained. We'll run more tests to rule out any underlying condition. Fiona tried not to panic. She told herself it was likely just normal pregnancy-related changes. Still, a small knot of anxiety lodged in her chest. A week passed before Henry returned from New York, triumphant in his negotiations. He breezed through the door, briefcase in hand, his grin fading when he saw Fiona's apprehensive expression. She explained the medical findings. Dr. Lee is concerned I might have an autoimmune issue. I need more tests, Henry. He frowned, sinking into the sofa. Autoimmune issues, what does that mean? It could complicate the pregnancy, she replied, voice trembling. Doctor, Lee wants me to see a specialist. Henry's shoulders tensed. Look, whatever you need, we'll do it. But are we sure now's the best time for this? I mean, if it's dangerous. Fiona's heart clenched at the implication he might be hinting at. She hadn't even considered terminating the pregnancy. This baby is part of us, she managed, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. I'm not giving up, he sighed, nodding. Right. Fine, I just need to think. That night, Henry tossed and turned, consumed by guilt and fear. Fiona felt more alone than ever, clinging to the hope that he'd come around. But as the weeks passed, his business demands only intensified, and his emotional distance grew. Fiona was left to navigate a precarious health challenge with minimal support from the one person whose presence she needed most. Fiona's appointment with the specialist Dr. Christopher Brown marked the start of a new reality. Dr. Brown was a respected maternal fetal medicine expert in his early 50s. Tall and calm, he carried a reputation for guiding high-risk pregnancies with compassionate expertise. He reviewed Fiona's records, asked detailed questions, and recommended a series of tests. It appears your immune system might be producing certain antibodies that could affect your organs and the baby's development, he said gently. We'll monitor closely, and there are medications that can help, but it's crucial you follow up often. His words landed with sobering weight. Fiona tried to quell her mounting anxiety. What about stress, she asked, Recalling Dr. Lee's warning, Dr. Brown offered a sad smile. Stress can exacerbate autoimmune disorders. Try to keep calm, rest, and get emotional support. Fiona thought of Henry's incessant absences, the tension in their once happy home. She forced a nod, promising to do her best. In the following weeks, she submerged herself in medical appointments and quiet self-care. She took gentle walks, practiced prenatal yoga, and prepared healthy meals that might bolster her immune system. Friends from her volunteer circles rallied around, providing rides to the hospital whenever Henry was unavailable. Meanwhile, Henry found himself more immersed in his business empire than ever before. The success of his latest deal led to more partnerships, each demanding a piece of him. Between flights and meetings, his moments at home were fleeting, and even then, he seemed preoccupied. One night, Fiona laid out her latest ultrasound images on the kitchen table, hoping to spark some fatherly excitement. Henry barely glanced at them before muttering something about an urgent email. As her pregnancy advanced, Fiona sensed a gaping chasm opening between them. Henry's polite responses and occasional apologies didn't soften the feeling of abandonment she felt, especially as her health remained in delicate balance. One weekend, he returned from a trip to Dallas, particularly agitated, ranting about investor demands. Fiona tried to comfort him, but he shrugged her off with a dismissive, "I just need some space." That brief exchange rattled Fiona. She realized Henry was slipping away, possibly seeking an escape from the emotionally fraught atmosphere at home. The once glamorous life they shared now seemed more like a performance, with Fiona cast in the role of a lonely spectator and Henry the ever-distant star. Fiona woke one morning to find Henry already gone. This was not unusual, but it still stung. His typical note was replaced by a curt text called Redwood Financial about some documents. "They'll need your signature." Confused, she poured herself a cup of herbal tea and tried to distract herself from the wave of nausea returning with the pregnancy's progress. Later that afternoon, a call came in from Redwood Financial. A polite woman named Michelle explained that Henry had set up a trust arrangement. Fiona was to sign several legal documents that would finalize the transfer of certain assets. Fiona, taken aback, asked that the documents be emailed so she could review them. She opened the file on her laptop, only to be confronted by reams of dense legal language, references to an irrevocable trust, clauses limiting beneficiary rights, and fine print disclaimers. She left a message for Henry, asking for clarity, but received only a generic text in reply, "Busy. Will explain later." Alarmed, Fiona reached out to an old college friend, Mark Johnson, now an attorney. After scanning the documents, Mark's tone darkened. "It looks like Henry is compartmentalizing significant assets into a trust you won't have ready access to. If something goes wrong like a divorce, you could be cut off from these funds." Fiona felt a sharp pang of betrayal, tears filling her eyes. Why would he do that now? Mark cleared his throat gently. "Could be standard estate planning. Could also be more. You need to be cautious." That evening, Fiona confronted Henry in their living room, documents in hand. "I got a call from Redwood Financial. What's this about a trust that excludes me?" Henry, exhausted from back-to-back meetings, bristled at the accusation. "It's just business, Fiona," he said, face tight. "I have investors. I need to protect certain assets." "Protect from whom?" Fiona asked, her voice trembling. "From me?" He looked away. "It's not personal. My legal team advised me to set this up to shield funds. It's best for the company." "It's best for you," Fiona fired back. "I'm your wife, Henry. I'm pregnant and sick. You didn't even talk to me before doing this?" He grimaced, an undercurrent of guilt slipping through his irritation. "I'm sorry. Things are complicated. Let's not blow this out of proportion." But it was too late. The trust documents stood as damning evidence of Henry's commitment to his empire above all else. Fiona walked away, clutching the pages, her mind swirling with a dread she could no longer ignore. Over the following weeks, Fiona threw herself into managing her health. Dr. Brown's regimen of medications and frequent checkups began stabilizing some of her concerning symptoms. She also attempted to keep her stress under control, though the situation with Henry weighed heavily on her heart. She sought solace in the small victories of pregnancy, the fluttery sensation of the baby kicking, the improvement in her lab results, the unwavering support from friends. Angela White, in particular, proved a steadfast ally, picking Fiona up for doctor's appointments whenever Henry was unavailable, an increasingly common occurrence. Henry, meanwhile, rented a sleek penthouse apartment downtown, initially framing it as a temporary crash pad for overnight business stays. But days turned into a week, and he barely returned to their home. Their once shared mansion, filled with polished floors and designer furniture, became a silent stage on which Fiona battled her anxieties alone. The loneliness became intolerable one afternoon when she received a call from Redwood Financial again. They demanded her signature on additional documents related to shifting assets. This time, Fiona refused and told them she wanted her own lawyer's review first. She sensed the momentum of Henry's strategy. He was insulating himself financially, apparently preparing for a worst-case scenario. Her suspicions confirmed, Fiona dialed Mark Johnson. "I won't sign anything," she said, her voice quivering. "I want to protect myself and my child. Henry's barely around. I'm scared he's leaving me for good." Mark listened patiently, advising her to document everything and ensure she didn't lose her rightful share of assets. Fiona appreciated his calm professionalism, but the emotional toll pressed heavily on her. She lay awake at night, one hand on her growing belly, trying to quell the fear of raising a child alone while also battling health complications. One day, after yet another lonely prenatal class, she found Henry waiting at the house. He'd come to collect more of his belongings, or so he said. She confronted him in the foyer, fighting tears. "Henry, can we please talk?" she pleaded. "Are you moving out for good?" He avoided her gaze, shifting uncomfortably. "I'm not abandoning you, Fiona. I just need space. My work, my stress. I can't focus with all this, she repeated, heart twisting. "You mean me, my illness, our child?" he exhaled, looking momentarily pained. "That's not fair. You know it's more complicated than that." Fiona pressed a hand to her abdomen, feeling the baby move as if in protest. "I'm fighting to keep myself and our baby healthy, Henry. But you're busy insulating yourself from us financially. That's the reality." Henry said nothing, merely gathered his suitcases and left. The shutting of the front door resonated through the cavernous hall, echoing the finality of his departure. Fiona sank onto a nearby chair, tears slipping down her cheeks as the baby shifted inside her, a poignant reminder she was no longer just fighting for herself. Henry's new penthouse offered a panoramic view of Sacramento, an ambitious businessman's dream. But no matter how impressive the skyline, guilt gnawed at him. He told himself he was doing this for everyone's benefit. Fiona needed a calm environment, he reasoned. Yet a part of him knew the truth. He was running from emotional responsibility. Work devoured his days. His tech platform was on the verge of a major launch, and every detail demanded his attention. He told himself he'd make it up to Fiona once the chaos subsided, once he secured the biggest success of his career. Yet nights in the penthouse felt hollow. He slept fitfully, haunted by the memory of Fiona's tear-streaked face. Back at the mansion, Fiona found her days long and exhausting. Her autoimmune condition flared unpredictably, causing bouts of pain and nausea. She relied heavily on Dr. Brown's treatments and Angela's steadfast kindness. Though physically drained, her spirit remained unexpectedly resilient. Late one evening, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Answering cautiously, she heard a warm, familiar voice. "Fiona? It's Angela. I'm at the hospital. You need to get down here." Alarm coursed through her. "Hospital? What's wrong?" "It's Henry," Angela said quietly. "He collapsed at a meeting. They think it's sheer exhaustion or stress, but I figured you should know." Despite everything, Fiona's heart lurched with concern. She threw on a jacket and rushed to the hospital. Angela met her in the waiting area, her face drawn with worry. "Where is he?" Fiona asked, breathless. Angela pointed down the hall. "He's stable now, but they're doing tests. They said it's stress-related. He's been pushing himself too hard." Fiona felt an odd mixture of sympathy and frustration. She approached Henry's room cautiously. He lay in the hospital bed, eyes closed, and the fourth drip ran into his arm, and his phone, ever present, rested on the bedside table. When he sensed her presence, his eyes flickered open, and a wave of embarrassment crossed his features. "What are you doing here?" he asked softly, clearing his throat. She swallowed. "Angela called me. I came because Henry, you're still my husband." He laughed bitterly. "Some husband I've been." They stared at each other in tense silence. Eventually, Henry looked away. "Doctor says I've got dangerously high blood pressure." Ironic, isn't it? I'm the one always preaching self-control, and now I can't even control my own stress. Fiona edged closer to the bed, arms folded protectively over her belly. "This can't keep going on. We're destroying ourselves, Henry." He nodded weakly, pain etched into the lines on his face. "I know." But even in that moment of vulnerability, Fiona sensed a wall between them. He was still that driven businessman, clinging to the remnants of control. She could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes, as though he was already figuring out how to spin this setback into a win. When the doctor allowed Henry to be discharged, Fiona offered him a ride home. He declined, insisting he had a car service waiting. She watched him leave the hospital lobby, shoulders slumped. Sadness washed over her. Their marriage felt like a frayed tapestry, threads unraveling from all sides. As she made her way back to her car, she pressed a hand to her abdomen. The baby kicked, and she closed her eyes, whispering a silent vow. "No matter what happens with Henry, I'll protect you." For the first time, she acknowledged the possibility that she might have to raise her child alone. The next few weeks brought a series of jolts to Fiona's already delicate state. Her autoimmune symptoms intensified, leading to unpredictable bouts of fever and fatigue. Dr. Brown tweaked her medication, cautioning her yet again about the dangers of stress. One rainy afternoon, Fiona sat in her living room, flipping through medical bills and insurance forms. She hated feeling powerless, yet that was the exact state she found herself in, dependent on Henry's money, Henry's decisions, Henry's fleeting moments of concern. Just as she felt her resolve slipping, the doorbell rang. It was Mark Johnson, his expression guarded. He held a folder under his arm. "Fiona, I've been looking deeper into Henry's financial moves. You need to see this." She ushered him inside, heart pounding. They sat in the living room as Mark explained what he'd discovered. Henry had been transferring large sums of money into offshore accounts for the past few months. The trust arrangement was only part of a larger plan to insulate his assets. "He's moving his money out of reach," Mark said gently. "If he decides to walk away, you could be left with far less than you think." Fiona's eyes brimmed with tears of betrayal. She gazed around the lavish mansion, now revealed as a fragile facade. "So I'm basically facing the prospect of him abandoning me financially and emotionally while I'm pregnant and dealing with a serious health condition." Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I won't let that happen. We can file certain claims or even a legal separation to protect you and the baby. But you need to decide how far you want to go." Fiona stared at the folder in her lap, feeling a swell of anger. This was her life, a life she had built with Henry, under the assumption that love and partnership meant support, not abandonment. She clenched her jaw. Do whatever it takes to secure what my child and I need. I won't let him hang us out to dry. Mark nodded, rising to leave. I'll prepare the paperwork. Call me when you're ready. After he left, Fiona sank into the couch, heart throbbing with a mingled sense of loss and determination. Her phone buzzed. It was Henry, texting to say he'd be out of town for business again. She almost laughed at the dark irony. He'd left her to fend for herself, all the while siphoning off the wealth he claimed was theirs. She curled a hand around her belly, feeling the baby move. We'll be okay, she whispered, voice trembling. I'll fight for you with everything I have. That night, Angela stopped by with groceries and a hug, just as the tears began to overwhelm Fiona. They sat in the kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound between them for a while. I can't believe he's doing this, Fiona said shakily. How did we get here? Angela squeezed her hand. Sometimes people reveal who they truly are under pressure. You need to focus on getting through your pregnancy and protecting your future. Henry's made his choices, Fiona nodded, steeling herself. She might have once been the sweet volunteer with a heart full of trust, but life had forced her to adapt. She wasn't just a victim, she was a mother to be with a responsibility to survive, even if it meant going to war with the man she once loved more than life itself. As Henry's offshore dealings deepened, fate delivered a curveball that rattled his empire. The ambitious tech platform he'd been developing faltered during its beta launch. Investors grew skittish. Stock valuations seesawed. Henry spent sleepless nights firefighting PR disasters while scrambling to patch the platform's technical flaws. The mounting stress took a visible toll. Dark circles ringed Henry's eyes, and his shoulders sagged beneath the weight of looming deadlines and potential lawsuits. He avoided Fiona entirely, convinced his presence would only heighten both their anxieties. Instead, he poured every ounce of energy into salvaging his company's crown jewel. Fiona, however, had her own crisis to face. One afternoon, she collapsed at home, seized by sharp abdominal pains and dizziness. Angela rushed over, finding Fiona pale and barely conscious. An ambulance sped Fiona to the hospital, where Dr. Brown discovered her blood pressure had skyrocketed dangerously. Henry, alerted by a frantic text from Angela, appeared at the hospital a few hours later, visibly shaken. He found Fiona in a private room, hooked to the fourth drips and monitors. She looked fragile, her once lively eyes dulled by pain. "I'm sorry," he whispered, approaching her bed. "I came as soon as I could." Fiona managed a faint nod, though she couldn't muster much energy to speak. Angela stood by her side, arms crossed, her glare conveying a silent admonishment to Henry. Dr. Brown arrived moments later, explaining that while they'd stabilized Fiona for now, her condition remained precarious. Stress, he emphasized again, was a significant threat to her and the baby. Henry sank into a chair, staring at the medical equipment. Guilt gnawed at him. As he looked at Fiona's wan complexion, he realized how close he was to losing everything that truly mattered. The ambition, the deals, the offshore accounts, none of it felt meaningful if it meant endangering the life of his wife and unborn child. He stayed at her bedside that night, phone switched off for the first time in ages. The hospital's fluorescent lights reflected off the antiseptic floors, casting sterile shadows across Fiona's face. She dozed in fitful spurts, occasionally waking to glance at Henry before drifting off again. By morning, Dr. Brown announced that Fiona was stable but recommended a longer hospital stay. Henry stepped into the corridor to take a call from his coup, who delivered grim news about potential investor lawsuits. For once, Henry couldn't muster any reaction. The only lawsuit that mattered was the one he waged against fate. desperately trying to keep Fiona and their baby alive. When he returned to Fiona's room, she gave him a weak, sad smile. "Go," she whispered. "Handle your crisis." He shook his head. "No, I'm staying. I can't keep running." But as the day wore on, his phone buzzed non-stop with urgent messages. Fiona saw him pacing in the hallway, torn between two worlds. In the end, she closed her eyes, letting the steady beep of the heart monitor lull her into a restless sleep. She couldn't force Henry to be the husband she needed. He had to choose that path himself. A few days later, Fiona was discharged from the hospital with strict orders for bed rest and minimal stress. Henry pleaded with her to come to his penthouse, arguing it was closer to the hospital and that he could arrange private nursing care there. Exhausted and eager for peace, she agreed. The penthouse was pristine and modern, a testament to Henry's taste for sleek lines and cutting-edge technology. A private nurse named Lily Smith greeted Fiona warmly, helping her to a spacious guest bedroom. Despite the luxurious surroundings, the atmosphere felt more clinical than cozy. Henry attempted to be more present. He rescheduled meetings to work from home, frequently checking in on Fiona's vitals. But the tension between them remained. Their once intimate conversations had turned polite and perfunctory. Fiona felt like a guest in Henry's domain rather than a partner in his life. One night, restless on the plush penthouse couch, Fiona heard Henry on a phone call in the adjacent room. She caught snippets of phrases like offshore assets and trust limitations. Her stomach twisted. Even now, amidst her fragile state, Henry continued to orchestrate his financial safety net. But fate wouldn't wait for them to figure things out. Early the next morning, Fiona jolted awake with excruciating abdominal pains. She gasped, struggling to breathe. Lily rushed in, checking Fiona's blood pressure. It was dangerously high again. An ambulance was summoned. Henry stumbled out of his room, disoriented, and followed in a daze as they whisked Fiona to the hospital. In the frantic blur that followed, Dr. Brown delivered grim news. The baby was showing signs of distress, and Fiona's body was nearing a breaking point. They had little choice but to perform an emergency C-section to save both mother and child. Henry stood outside the operating room, numb with panic. Memories of lavish galas and triumphant boardroom deals flashed through his mind, now rendered meaningless compared to the life or death stakes playing out behind those double doors. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Brown emerged. "You have a daughter," he said, offering a reassuring nod. "She's premature but stable. We'll keep her in the NICU for close observation. Fiona's lost a lot of blood, but we've stabilized her as well. She's in recovery." Relief collided with guilt in Henry's chest, tears burning his eyes. A father. He was a father now, yet he couldn't quell the dread that his own choices had contributed to this harrowing ordeal. When he was finally allowed to see Fiona, she lay pale and exhausted, a tangle of tubes and monitors surrounding her bed. "Henry," she rasped, her eyes fluttering open. "The baby, is she okay?" He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "She's in the NICU, but Dr. Brown says she'll be fine." Tears formed in Fiona's eyes, and he gently took her hand, squeezing it. In that moment, he realized how close he'd come to losing them both. No empire, no offshore account, no ambition could ever replace the miracle fighting for life in the NICU, or the woman lying in this hospital bed. He stayed by Fiona's side, phone off, as the hours slid into night. At some point, exhaustion claimed her, and he sat watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. A man with wealth beyond most imaginations, he had never felt more vulnerable. But in that vulnerability lay the beginning of what could be genuine change if he had the courage to follow through. In the weeks after Grace's dramatic birth, Fiona remained in the hospital to recover, while their newborn daughter fought to gain strength in the NICU. Henry spent his days shuttling between the two, splitting his time between Grace's incubator and Fiona's recovery room. The hospital became their temporary home, stripping away any veneer of high society and luxury. Money meant little in the face of medical uncertainties. Henry found himself enthralled by Grace's delicate features each time he peeked into her incubator. She was tiny, hooked to monitors and tubes, but each day brought small improvements, an ounce gained, a slight increase in stable breathing. He asked endless questions of the NICU nurses, determined to understand every aspect of her care. To his own surprise, the thrill of fatherhood overshadowed his once consuming hunger for business conquests. Fiona's healing process was slow but steady. Physically drained and emotionally exhausted, she spent hours asleep, awakened periodically by doctors checking vitals. Whenever she was lucid, Henry stayed close, updating her on Grace's progress. Occasionally, she'd see a tenderness in his eyes that reminded her of the man she first fell in love with. Still, the scars of betrayal lay fresh. She couldn't simply forget how he'd abandoned her in the darkest months of her pregnancy. Angela and Mark visited regularly, bringing care packages and unwavering moral support. Mark gently reminded Fiona to keep certain legal protections in mind, though he respected her need to focus on recovering rather than diving into another battle with Henry. In unguarded moments, Fiona wondered if Henry's shift in behavior was genuine or simply an emotional reflex to the crisis they'd endured. After nearly a month, Grace improved enough to be discharged, though she required close outpatient monitoring. Fiona, also stabilized, left the hospital around the same time. Henry arranged for them to stay at the penthouse, citing easy access to top-tier medical facilities. He even hired a private pediatric nurse to assist with Grace's specialized care. Those early days at home were chaotic and magical in equal measure. Grace cried at all hours, but the moments of holding her close, rocking her, feeling her tiny fingers curl around theirs, melted Fiona's heart. For the first time, Henry seemed fully present, cooking simple meals, running errands, and waking in the middle of the night to soothe Grace when she fussed. Yet, for all his efforts, Fiona struggled to let her guard down. She wasn't sure how to reconcile the attentive father Henry was becoming with the calculating businessman who had siphoned assets offshore. One evening, as she rocked Grace to sleep, Henry approached quietly. "I've missed so much," he whispered, gazing at Grace with awe. "I don't want to miss another moment of her life." Fiona studied his face, recalling the whirlwind of betrayal that had brought them to this juncture. "Henry, I want to believe you, but trust doesn't just snap back." He nodded, looking remorseful. "I understand. All I can do is try every day to show you I've changed." She turned her gaze to Grace, sleeping in her arms. The tiny heartbeat that pulsed in that fragile body was a testament to survival against impossible odds. She realized that she, too, carried a capacity for resilience she'd never known before. Whether or not Henry truly changed, she would always be able to stand on her own. For now, they existed in a cautious dance, each uncertain but hopeful that the near tragedy of Grace's birth might open a path to genuine reconciliation. In the months that followed, Henry strove to prove his commitment to both Fiona and Grace. He scaled back his office hours, delegated more tasks, and eased off the globe-trotting lifestyle. His focus pivoted from growth at all costs to ensuring the family's well-being. He even began attending therapy, acknowledging that his issues with control and fear of vulnerability had fueled many of his previous decisions. Fiona appreciated the shift, yet remained wary. She spent her days bonding with Grace and managing her own health, which, thanks to Dr. Brown's regimen, was slowly stabilizing. Each time Henry mentioned business deals or offshore accounts, anxiety fluttered through her. She wasn't naive about how quickly priorities could shift once daily pressures resumed. One evening, Henry surprised Fiona by inviting her to a small dinner at the penthouse. Dressed casually for the first time in ages, he prepared a modest pasta dish. Though it was slightly overcooked, Fiona was touched by the genuine effort. Over candlelight, he reached across the table. "I've terminated the offshore transfers," he said, his voice earnest, "and I dissolved that trust. Everything I was doing to protect my assets, I've undone it. Mark can verify. I want to make things right." Fiona's fork paused midway to her mouth. The revelation left her momentarily stunned. "You did?" He nodded, eyes reflecting sincerity. "I've seen what really matters. No more secrets, Fiona." Her chest constricted with a mixture of hope and caution. "It'll take me time to fully believe it," she admitted. He bowed his head. "I know. I'll wait as long as it takes." Still, life rarely grants smooth sailing. A few days later, a summons arrived at the penthouse from an investor who felt misled by Henry's earlier tech platform fiasco. They were suing for damages, claiming financial losses tied to Henry's alleged overpromises. The news rattled the household. Fiona, already anxious, worried how another crisis might pull Henry away. "This could drag on for years," he muttered, tossing the papers onto the coffee table. "I can't let it ruin everything we've built." Fiona felt a stab of fear. She recalled the Henry who would shut her out at the first sign of business trouble. Yet the new Henry surprised her. Rather than diving headlong into battle, he considered settling. "I hate paying them off," he admitted, "but it might be the best way to avoid a prolonged fight." In the end, Henry chose the settlement route, swallowing his pride for the sake of familial stability. The payout was significant, but it stemmed the tide of legal scrutiny. When all was finalized, Henry collapsed onto the living room sofa, emotionally spent. Fiona sat beside him, resting a hand on his. "Thank you," she said softly, "for putting us first." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting genuine regret and relief. "After almost losing you and Grace, I realized I can't measure my life by net worth alone." Fiona leaned her head on his shoulder. She remembered lying alone in a cold hospital bed, thinking Henry had abandoned her forever. The memory still hurt, but perhaps they had reached an inflection point. If his actions continued matching his words, maybe their family had a shot at real unity. Time brought steady healing to both Grace and Fiona. By the time Grace was 6 months old, she was hitting baby milestones, rolling over, babbling, reaching for toys. Fiona's autoimmune condition stabilized under Dr. Brown's vigilant eye, and her energy levels improved enough that she began revisiting some philanthropic ideas. The near-death ordeal had awakened a desire in Fiona to champion healthcare causes. She wanted to help other women facing high-risk pregnancies. Henry, seeing her passion rekindled, encouraged it wholeheartedly. Meanwhile, he wrestled with his own professional crossroads. After nearly losing everything, the unrelenting drive that once fueled him had dimmed. He quietly explored selling parts of his business, no longer enthralled by endless expansions. One late evening, after coaxing Grace back to sleep, Fiona discovered Henry in his home office, sifting through financial statements. Her chest tightened, recalling past deceptions. But this time Henry looked up with a weary smile. "I'm thinking of selling one of my subsidiaries," he admitted. "There's a good offer on the table, and I don't need to own everything. It might be time to focus on what really matters." Fiona stepped closer, heart pounding with cautious optimism. "Like what?" He shrugged, gesturing around the penthouse that had once symbolized his ambition. "You, Grace, a balanced life. Maybe using some of this fortune for genuine good. I don't have to be that cutthroat mogul anymore." Fiona studied him, seeing sincerity in his eyes. In that moment, she recalled the day she first saw him at a charity gala, drawn by his charm but hopeful about his philanthropic side. Perhaps this was the Henry she'd sensed all along, the one overshadowed by greed and fear. Weeks passed, and Henry finalized the sale of his subsidiary for a substantial sum. True to his word, he donated a portion to the children's hospital that had helped save Grace's life. Fiona stood beside him during the ceremonial check presentation, pride glowing in her chest. With looming business pressures eased, Henry immersed himself in fatherhood. He learned how to calm Grace's colic, how to make her giggle with silly faces, how to read her a bedtime story in soothing tones. Fiona, in turn, invested her rekindled energy into organizing a charity gala aimed at supporting mothers with complicated pregnancies, a cause close to her heart. Their relationship wasn't magically perfect. Trust once broken doesn't mend overnight. Yet every day, Henry and Fiona took small steps toward understanding and forgiving each other. They learned to communicate better, sometimes with the help of a marriage counselor. And with each shared laugh over Grace's antics, they inched closer to rekindling the love that once felt lost. Nearly a year after Grace's precarious birth, Fiona stood on a small stage in a grand ballroom for the survivors' charity gala. Lights glimmered off high ceilings, illuminating round tables set for donors and supporters. This event was deeply personal, embodying Fiona's journey from desperate hospital nights to triumphant new beginnings. Backstage, Henry cradled Grace, who gurgled happily in her ruffled dress. He watched Fiona approach the podium, remembering the timid volunteer he'd first encountered. Now she radiated quiet confidence, her story poised to inspire others. "Good evening," Fiona began, voice resonant in the hushed ballroom. "I stand here not just as a survivor, but as a mother who almost lost her life, bringing a child into this world. Tonight's gala is a celebration of resilience of every woman who has ever been told her pregnancy was too risky, her body too weak." Polite applause swelled, and Fiona continued, describing how the funds would benefit research and supportive programs for women facing high-risk pregnancies. Each word was infused with the authenticity of lived experience, drawing tears and admiration from the crowd. Henry, holding Grace, felt an unaccustomed swell of awe. The woman he'd hurt, the woman he'd nearly lost, stood poised and unbroken, channeling her pain into a cause that would help countless others. For the first time, he fully understood the depth of her strength and just how fortunate he was to be by her side. When the final auction item sold, the event organizer announced a record-breaking total. The crowd erupted in cheers. Some hurried to congratulate Fiona, while others praised Henry for matching donations. Cameras flashed, capturing their family in a moment of triumph. Yet, amid the applause, Henry had one more surprise. With Grace settled comfortably in his arms, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Fiona's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring, a symbol of renewal rather than old promises. "Fiona," Henry said, his voice trembling slightly, "I know I broke your trust in ways. Words alone can't repair, but I've spent every day of this past year trying to become a man worthy of you and Grace. Will you marry me again?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. The memory of hospital rooms, legal threats, and heartbreak still lingered, but so did the warmth of Henry's steady presence these past months. She glanced at Grace, who stared up at them with innocent wonder, and then back at Henry. "Yes," she whispered, voice quavering. "Yes, I'll marry you again." Applause thundered around them, guests moved by the raw display of devotion. Henry slipped the ring onto Fiona's finger, and they embraced, Grace giggling between them. It wasn't a perfect ending to a fairy tale. It was the start of a life built on second chances, a life more real and profound than any fleeting dream of riches. In the months that followed, Henry and Fiona renewed their vows in an intimate ceremony at the same botanical garden where he had first proposed. Surrounded by a handful of close friends and family, they promised to support each other through all storms. no longer blinded by unchecked ambition or hidden fears. Angela stood as Fiona's bridesmaid, while Mark Johnson, who had safeguarded Fiona's interests, officiated the ceremony, a reflection of how integral he'd become to their family's better future. With sincere effort and mutual respect, they forged ahead. Henry scaled back his once overwhelming empire, channeling funds into charitable projects dear to Fiona's heart. Grace thrived into a curious toddler, her laughter a fixture in their home. And Fiona herself emerged a force in the philanthropic world, using her story to champion healthcare reforms and maternal support programs. They had faced the brink of devastation, a marriage on life support, a child born prematurely, financial betrayals, and health crises. But through the crucible of adversity, they discovered what truly mattered: love, resilience, and the simple fact that life's greatest treasures can't be stored in offshore accounts. It's not a fairy tale with a neat ending. It's the ongoing story of two flawed people choosing to heal together every single day. New beginnings can bloom in the darkest seasons, and Fiona's remarkable journey proves just that. After all the betrayals, the heartbreak, and the life-threatening moments, she emerged stronger, securing her health, protecting her child, and even rebuilding her marriage on firmer ground. Her courage reminds us that resilience isn't about avoiding hardship, it's about facing it head-on and daring to rewrite the ending. Now, we want you to be part of spreading Fiona's empowering message. If her story struck a chord with you, if you felt her pain, her hope, and her ultimate triumph, don't let it end here. Help us continue the mission of resilience by liking this video, sharing it with friends who need some inspiration, and subscribing to this channel for more stories that highlight the incredible strength we all hold. Together, we can honor Fiona's triumph and celebrate the power of second chances.